now that I've gone out of my way to read up on feminism and educate myself a bit, interesting that I couldn't possibly not be one. Effectively, to be a feminist is to be a non-sexist, because you're in favor of equal rights for women. Well, that's the female superiority because it focuses all on females because it's in the name. What about equal? Do you not understand? That in and of itself shows your ignorance on feminism because you view it by the name. You literally judge a book by its cover.
Let me point something out. There are men's human rights organizations that have written thousands, and I'm not kidding, thousands of articles that have been well researched on the subject of the issues affecting men and boys, and have offered good criticisms of feminism. Now, you have ignored all of that to argue against a strawman MHRA, somebody who takes issue with feminism because they don't like the name. And then you mock us for oversimplifying things?
Well, what about men? Join the feminist movement and make sure that they focus enough on the equality portion of that if you want. Guess what's not going to do anything? Making an opposition movement to a movement that is based on equal rights. Dip fucks.
Dip fucks. It's like dipshit, but he said fuck.
I've made videos directed at MRAs before, but at this point, I realize they don't really deserve any respect. Because the fact is, you don't know what feminism is.
Says the guy who didn't do any of his research outside Google.
You think you do, but you don't. And so previously I've suggested that both sides join forces, but
here we go.
The fact is that all the MRAs have to do is join with the feminists because apparently they're in favor of equal rights. Well, at that point, they're feminists by definition. A perfect example, consider the percentage of homeless that are men. Except for the fact that you consider the percentage of homeless families that are women with their children, and it's 2/3 of them, and...
You know, for somebody who claims to have been educated on something, you don't cite any sources.
Which is why I say that people who sympathize with the men's issues should specifically join the feminism movement so that they can make sure that they focus on equality instead of just women's issues.
Walk up to a high-profile feminist and say, "Hi, I'm a man, and I want to join the feminist movement to make sure that you guys are focusing on equality." See how that goes.
Now, you know, this is starting to sound really hypocritical for me, considering all the videos I made where I actually said I could agree with MRAs when I didn't know fuck one about feminism enough to know that if I actually agreed with their issues, I'd be a feminist.
Let me ask you a question. Do you believe in individualism, free will, enlightenment, and things like that? If so, then you're a Satanist. See the problem with that logic?
Wow, I am so glad I went out of my way to actually educate myself and stop being an idiot!
Oh, you're not done.
And to those of you who take issues with both sides, and instead choose to stand above it all and just call yourself a humanist, I'm sad to say that you're just as ignorant as the MRAs I was just talking about because you don't understand what feminism actually is, based on my judgments from what I've heard from people whom I respect who and to all of you who so vehemently disagree with everything I just said, comment below. If I'm wrong, I would like to know. I promise you that so long as the preponderance of evidence is in your favor, then you'll win out.
I have made sure to read literature from both the feminist movement and the men's human rights movement. I have read feminist epistemology. I have read feminist standpoint theory, feminist postmodernism, feminist empiricism. On my tablet, I have The Second Sex. I have Feminist Mystique. I have the Scum Manifesto, and I think something by Gloria Steinem. So, believe me, I've read the literature. I've also read academic papers on JSTOR related to gendered issues. I'm also aware of the fact that women are the majority voter in many developed countries with a kind of a westernized election system. I understand that a lot of guys that might constitute positions at the top of society, but they also constitute the most people at the bottom of society. And I feel that part of my activism involves addressing a need that has been neglected in society. And to understand where I come from, you need to understand the distinction between a gender centrist and a human rights specialist. A gender centrist is someone who will put a gender identity at the center of their worldview to the exclusion of others. A human rights specialist starts from ethical humanist principles and specializes in a demographic. I am the latter. I'm a human rights specialist. Now, that said, despite what people might tell you, I am not sexist. I am not misogynistic. I have no hatred in my heart. What I am here to say, though, is that I can't save the world. And as a man, the issues that affect men affect me. And I wish to speak for myself without being told to join an ideology that I do not feel is representing me very well. I would much rather be part of a movement that is working directly on the things that affect me. And I make it very sure not to interfere with the work that women do on their own issues. So, that said, I feel that nothing I've said is unfair, and I do feel that I do call myself an anti-feminist, not because I'm anti-equality, because that's just a propaganda trick. Seriously. Being a feminism and equality, they're not the same thing. They say it is, but it's not. Judge an ideology and the people who support it by what they do, not what they say. So that said, I feel that a lot of what I do is about standing up for myself and standing up for guys who have had their needs neglected and who need better representation. That's pretty much the street cred I've got to work with. It might not be perfect. I certainly don't know everything. But I advocate a society where people have the ability to stand up for themselves, make the choices they want to make about who represents them. And if they feel unsatisfied, they should not feel in any way coerced to join an ideology like feminism if they don't want to, if they feel like they could get better representation elsewhere. And I also advocate a society where basic respect and decency go all around. I do not expect people to be put into any roles if they don't want to be put into those roles. And frankly, it's a very live and let live kind of thing. But men's needs have been neglected. Men are discriminated against. And it's considered taboo to even talk about it. And I think that in itself is justification for the men's human rights movement. As I bring up the problems I'm about to tell you, a little annotation thing will pop up that will guide you to the source you need. One source to be concerned about, or rather one overarching problem, is what Christina Hoff Sommers described as feminism's recklessness with statistics. That is to say, feminism has made claims using false statistical figures that are not based on reality for the purpose of alarming the public and creating a hysteria in our culture. So some examples. Attorney Edward Greer has described something called legal dominance feminisms. What he calls legal dominance feminisms claim that only 2% of rape claims were false. This was not true. The trail for evidence behind this figure ran cold. The Atlantic did a report on the feminist myth that women do 2/3 of the world's work for 10% of the income and own 1% of the world's property. Another misconception is that men are in power because men self-actualize that power, where we need to remember that women are the majority voter in most developed westernized societies. women are also control the most spending power, so that when men who are in their CEO positions, when they get those jobs, they need to demonstrate their capacity to satisfy their customers, which more often than not will be women. There's also the misconception that men are in this default state of rapist, which is the notion that feminist rape culture puts out. And I think that these myths, which are pushed by feminists, do not serve as evidence that feminists have my interests in mind as a man. They seem to be ready to paint me as less than human. And I think that's a good reason for me as a human rights activist to take issue. And so, please offer some evidence that feminism is making steps, actionable steps, toward helping men. Don't just tell me that they care about equality. I've heard that before. You don't need to tell me that again. I want to see proof of that now. What they say is not the same thing as what they do. It's what they do that concerns me. When you look at things like the Agent Orange files, you get an idea about what a lot of feminists think about men. Now, granted, people call these, the fringe feminists, the people on the edge. But note that some of these feminists are taken seriously. A lot of feminists that are radical or extreme, they're not just fringe, as John the Other put it, a very prolific MHRA. They're not just fringe, they're famous, in his words. They're journalists, they're writers, they're people who are influential in society, and people who are hateful, in my mind, should not influence public opinion or the way that we live our lives. I think that in the society that we're in, we are so focused on women that we neglect men. I cannot think of any other reason for ignoring the fact that men constitute a larger number of rape victims than women when you factor in men in prisons. And yes, those do count, because not only is rape a horrible thing to begin with, but also because a lot of the guys in prisons have been wrongfully convicted. Maybe from false rape allegations, maybe from false accusations of domestic violence. There's also the problem that the World Health Organization released a report studying sexual assault victims for women and I've done a reading on that, and I've noticed that there's some holes in that study, without there being any equivalent research for men, leaving us in the dark about how widespread men's issues are. The lack of research is extremely disturbing. I mean, as a guy, wouldn't you want to know about problems affecting you and to know how widespread they are? I mean, wouldn't that in some way incent you to work on problems in your own community to try to actually alleviate some of those issues? So, again, try to get a lot of the conceptions about how things should be out of your head. Look at how things are. Look at what people are doing. And then ask yourself, who do you think, well, not even who, just what do you think you need to do to make the world a better place? Don't toss, just go ahead and toss MHRAs and feminism out of this whole thing. Okay? What can you do? Because what you're doing right now is not making the world a better place. You're misrepresenting the positions of the MHRM. You are also misrepresenting the positions of feminism. You don't understand what either are. You do not seem to have, you've talked about percentages, you've talked about being educated, yet you cite no sources, and your defense of feminism sticks largely to what feminists would say about themselves. So I don't feel you've done this, you've had any real, I don't think you're objective. And I think I've been totally fair with you. I don't think that there's any real hatred here, and I don't think that I'm wrong when I say that you really don't seem to understand just how problematic feminism has been and how justified the anger of MHRAs actually is. So I'd like to ask you to go ahead and do your research again, but don't limit it to Google. You can go ahead and use Google Scholar, that would be an improvement, but go to your local university, go to the library, go ahead and go to one of the computers, do searches in electronic databases. You can go ahead and check out some books, because frankly, people may assume that everything's on the internet, but that's not true. There's so much information in libraries that has not been digitized and you can't find anywhere else online. So go to the library, do your research there too. Go to government agencies, get some stats on demographics, find out who the majority voter is, look at crime reports, see what's been happening to men and women, break it down that way. Do the research yourself, learn about your local community, and if you think that you know better than anyone else about what equality looks like, then I want you to go ahead and work toward that in your local community. Don't sit here with your really misinformed commentary and pass judgment on those when you yourself don't have any experience to stand on. And again, nothing about what I said is unfair. And if you think I'm wrong, well, boy, I'd be happy to hear it. But that's all. Victor Zen out.